Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abuel Samad.
So, Sam, let's jump right into what we're driving. I had something nice that I'm happy to talk about, but I want to hear what you're in first.
Well, I had something really nice, too, and also really, really big, although not as big as it could be. And that's the new 2018 Lincoln Navigator, which is by far and away the best Navigator yet, by a long shot.
Yeah, and I guess we teased that a little bit last week where you'd mentioned that you had it and how finally Ford has successfully differentiated Lincoln quite a bit from its Ford counterparts.
Yeah, so the Navigator, obviously shares its platform with the Expedition and to some degree with the F-Series trucks, but particularly the Expedition. Both of them, they're both body-on-frame vehicles, just like the pickup trucks, with now aluminum bodies. The two big utilities, though, differ from the pickups in that they have an independent rear suspension, which is personally, I think a huge advantage over the GM pickups, the Escalade, the Tahoe or Suburban, Tahoe, and Yukon. And the GM trucks, have for decades been the segment leaders in terms of sales for full-size SUVs. But, I think the Ford and the Lincoln, I think have a really significant advantage because if you're going to have a big utility like this, one of the reasons to have such a large utility is to have, the 3-row capability, the ability to carry, 6, 7, 8 passengers, and adding the independent rear suspension makes a big difference because now when you don't have to leave room under the rear floor of the body for the center of the axle to move up and down, you're solidly bolting the differential and only the wheels are moving. That allows you to make the load floor in the back a lot lower, so you get more cargo room. Plus, you have much better seating in the third row. The Navigator and the Expedition are both available in short and long wheelbase forms, and I had the standard body. I hesitate to call it short. It's standard. It's like 120 some inches wheelbase, and I climbed back into the third row of this thing, and because the floor is so much lower than it is in a Suburban or a Tahoe, you have a much more natural seating position. I'm 5'10", and in the second row, I had tons and tons of room, and I was still very comfortable in the third row. And if you go to the long wheelbase version, which is almost a foot longer, you have even more space back there. So it's really very usable.
It puts the utility in the utility.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge. It's in terms of parking it's a pain in the neck to park. Although it does come with at least the one I had active parking assist, which makes it a lot easier to both parallel and perpendicular park, and that works pretty reliably now compared to the old days a decade ago when these systems first came out. So it's very impressive. But the thing that really sets the Navigator apart now, it used to be that. The Lincolns, for a long time have been based on the same platforms as their Ford siblings. And, when you got in, even when there was differentiation, like if you look at the current generation MKZ versus the Fusion, the body, all the sheet metal is completely different. It looks completely different on the outside. And a lot of the parts on the inside are different, but there's still a lot of little bits and pieces that are carried over, from the Ford to the Lincoln, so there's little detail touches that you can tell that, okay, this thing is sharing componentry with a more mainstream model. you get in this Lincoln, the Navigator, and you compare it to an Expedition or any other Ford, and there's really not a single visible piece that looks like it came out of a Ford. And really, there's I mean, the hardware architecture underneath is largely the same, but everything that you touch and see, it looks completely different, looks completely unique. That's not a trivial task to design and validate all those parts. But it's good to see that Lincoln is making that commitment to differentiate its products from the Ford products. So you keep the things that are good. Things, the powertrain, the 3.5 liter EcoBoost. Although for Lincoln, that's another little detail, but it's a differentiator. Lincoln is no longer using the EcoBoost branding on the engines, even though they're the same engines. They're no longer called EcoBoost when they're installed in a Lincoln. They're just GTDI or gasoline turbo direct injection GTDI engines.
Well, that sounds fancier.
Yeah, well, and frankly, the whole eco thing just doesn't really work.
Right, like
this thing got 16.5 miles per gallon. Which is
that's pretty good for.
Oh yeah, for a 3-ton truck.
Packing how much horsepower and torque? It's like 400 something horsepower, right?
450 horsepower and about the same amount of torque. And it's mated up with the 10-speed automatic, which was designed jointly between Ford and GM.
How do you like that 10-speed, by the way? Does it do the typical Ford sort of dithering before gear changes and stuff? It always seems that when GM and Ford develop a transmission together, GM's software or just the way it shifts, all of that stuff is better, even with the same hardware. So I'm just wondering what your take is.
Well, first of all, that hasn't always been the case. When they first did that 6-speed transaxle together, the first iterations of it, the Fords actually felt better than the GMs. Eventually, GM improved their software and their calibrations, and it got to be equal or better. But in its first iterations, the Fords generally felt better.
That was the 6F, right? Or what?
The 6F50, yeah.
Yeah.
The Ford designation was 6F50, and I think the GM is like 6T80 or something like that.
Yeah, it's close enough.
But at any rate, and I haven't actually driven a GM vehicle with the 10-speed in it yet, so I can't comment on how theirs feels. Hoping to do that soon. But my only previous experience with this 10-speed was in the Raptor a few months ago, and I was less impressed with it in the Raptor.
Yeah, I was well.
Yeah, well, I think in that one, I was trying to use the shift paddles and trying to do some trying to drive it a little more sporty, and it felt kind of lazy in that one.
Yep.
In this vehicle, the nature of the Navigator is a very different vehicle. I mean, it's obviously not intended to be a sport truck, or anything like that. And, I didn't really bother trying to, do the manual shifting, even though it's got steering wheel paddles and things like that. I just let it do its thing. I drove it as you would drive a big Lincoln. And, it felt smooth and quiet, and I never felt it shifting. I never would have guessed, that it was, from driving it, you can't really tell, if it's a 4-speed or a 10-speed. I mean, it was that smooth and refined. And I'm sure there's some slight differences in calibration between those two trucks, but it's mechanically the same. So I think it's fundamentally a good transmission, and it just comes down to the software setup for it. What it ultimately ends up feeling like. And like I said, I didn't drive this thing, as a sport truck. I drove it, fairly briskly at times, just to see, what a 3-ton, luxury SUV could do. And, it was more than acceptable. I mean, it has plenty of power to move that thing, plenty of torque. So, it was good in that respect. Everything else about it felt really nice. The Lincoln 30-way power adjustable seats in the front, with massaging and heat and everything else, very nice to have. It doesn't have, I think the dozen or so different massage patterns that you get in the Mercedes S-Class, but it still felt really nice on my back. So nothing really I would complain about with that thing. At just shy of $100,000. It's very competitive with what you would, get from, like a Mercedes-Benz GLS, or, probably what we'll see from the BMW X7 when it arrives, I think later this year, perhaps as soon as next week at the Geneva show in production form. So, I think, it's certainly cheaper than those vehicles are likely to be. So I think it's actually, I hesitate to call $100,000, SUV, a good value, but in its competitive set, right? It is a good value, and I think at this moment in time, I would say it's superior to the Escalade, which is its clearest natural competitor.
Really, I mean that's high praise. The Escalade is pretty good.
Yeah, no, it is. But this one is more modern at this moment in time. We will probably see a new Escalade, probably by the end of this year or early next year. Probably early next year. GM's rolling out their new full-size pickups right now, and the next generation of the utilities that are based on that platform will probably be coming out in the first half of next year. So it's we'll be seeing more of those, and I think it's going to be very interesting to watch this segment.
Yeah, I mean it's still a popular segment, and depending on what the price of fuel does, it will either be more popular or just continue along with the high end stuff. Is even when there's a gas crunch and stuff, these things don't diminish in popularity. People like them. Sales dip a little bit, but they still remain an aspirational, attainable vehicle that's because of what it is. It's high profile. So it really makes a lot of sense for both Ford and or for both Lincoln and Cadillac to be there and be there with good product. I'm interested that you compare them to the Mercedes and BMW stuff, because for me, in my mind, they don't really compete. They're just two different kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, if and in the most general level, full size, large luxury SUV, nominally, it's competitive with a GLS. I don't know how much actual cross shopping there is between something like a GLS and a Navigator, but at the 100,000 plus, price point, for a full size SUV, that would seem to be the outside of the Escalade would seem to be the most natural competitor. Perhaps the Lexus, was it the LX? The LX 570, but that one's not as big.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like even the Mercedes and the BMWs, they probably, in terms of length, they're probably as big. They feel narrower. They feel smaller.
Yeah. They definitely don't feel quite as gargantuan as this thing.
Yeah,
and there's some other neat features about the Navigator. I certainly like the automatic power running, retractable running boards. As you walk up to the truck. When it senses the key, it senses you walking up with the key on you, the running boards automatically lower down, making it much easier to step up into this thing, because it does sit pretty high on those 22-inch wheels. And then, as soon as you close the door, they retract back up to the bodywork. And then one of the other features, it's the first time I had an opportunity to try out Ford's Alexa integration. For anybody that's listening, sorry I said that the first time. If you happen to have an Amazon Echo device nearby, you might want to just mute the microphone for the next couple of minutes, because I'll probably say that word a few more times. But a bunch of companies now over the last year and a half, Hyundai was the first. I think BMW is doing it now. Several others now are offering some Alexa skills integration. And with the Amazon Echo, with Alexa, there's two kinds of integrations you can do. There's Alexa skills, which are basically little apps that you can write that allow you to connect an Echo to other devices, other non-Amazon devices, to execute certain commands. So like with Hyundai's setup, they have an Alexa skill that allows you to talk to your Echo and, ask it to do basically use the Echo to do voice commands through the BlueLink remote app to a Hyundai vehicle. So you can ask it to check your fuel level, or if you have a plug-in Hyundai vehicle, you can ask it to check your battery state of charge, things like that, through an Echo. So that's one form. That's the simpler form of Alexa integration. Ford is the first company to actually integrate Alexa voice services with their vehicle. And they haven't actually done it fully embedded, the Alexa voice services. Alexa voice services basically is the component that sits inside the Echo device and does the voice recognition and executes the commands. There are some other non-Amazon devices on the market now that embed Alexa voice services, like the Sonos One speaker, things like that. Ford is the first automaker to do that. But the way they've done it is they've done it through their Sync App Link capability, and using a custom Alexa app that sits on your phone. So if you're using a Lincoln vehicle, it's the Lincoln plus Alexa app in the Android Play Store, and there's a similar one in the iOS App Store. Or for Ford vehicles, it's a Ford plus Alexa app. And what that does is, once you connect that to your vehicle, you just say Alexa, and then the same kinds of commands you can do at home with an Echo device, you can do in the car. So you can say, Echo, play me a song, or Echo, tell me a joke, or Echo, let's play a game, or let's play Jeopardy. And you can play Jeopardy with the Echo in your car. It'll ask you the questions, and just like you can at home with an Echo device.
I mean, I guess that can keep you awake, but you know what else can do that is another person.
That's true. Those are kind of trivial applications, but I mean, there are some other, more useful applications, like, for example, if you have, a Nest thermostat at home, or, some sort of connected thermostat or connected light bulbs, things like that, and you want to, adjust the temperature as you're coming home, as you're approaching your home, or turn the lights on, things like that. You can do that through the Alexa app, through Alexa voice services, because it'll interpret your command and send it over the cloud to your home and do whatever it is you want done. And there's all kinds of other things you can do with it as well.
Yeah, I think they're going to continue to come up with new things that it can do as we go into this future of talking to devices to get them to do our bidding. And it is handy. As much as I complain about talking to machines, and it's not something I really enjoy.
It's handy to some people. I mean, do you have an Echo at home? Or Echoes?
We have a Google Home, which has stayed in the box. But like, in terms of some of the things that are handy, I will often, like, my wife and I will be talking, and we'll often just like I'll grab her phone and I'll tell Siri to, make a shopping list and set a reminder, that kind of thing. Like, those things are helpful. Like when you're in the car, and
you can create shopping lists through Alexa as well, and all kinds of other things.
I mean, it's totally not necessary, but
yeah,
I
do it. I have two Echo Dots sitting in a drawer that, when I got the first one, they were both gifted to me. When I got the first one, I opened it up, plugged it in, set it up, played with it for about 5 minutes, and then put it back in the drawer because I had no real use for it.
Right.
Because I don't have smart devices in my house. And, for things like timers and that, I just, say to my phone, hey,
use
Google.
A timer, right.
Yeah. Speaking of which.
This is the thing. This is the conundrum where, and maybe I'm just too old for it, or I'm just not the right person. I can't, unless I'm forcing myself to use the thing, I can't come up with an actual use for it. Like, I am the smart device in my home.
Yeah. Or you like to think you are anyway.
Yeah. I have a great self-worth. Yeah. So it sounds like the Navigator's a pretty good revision, and hopefully, because this is the shakeup at Ford too, hopefully some of the reasoning behind making that vehicle so different, because that's what Lincoln has needed for a long time. Hopefully, because of what's going on with senior leadership at Ford, that idea gets propagated more through the operation, and we see better and more differentiated execution of all of Ford's lines to really give them an identity. It's good to see them starting to do that. It's not cheap, but it's worth it because it does elevate Lincoln to be what they've been trying to make Lincoln for like a decade now.
Yeah. And before we finish up with the Navigator, there is one other detail I need to mention. The Navigator I had the black label package, and one of the theme that was on there, I forget what it's called, but it features whitewashed teak wood trim.
That sounds beautiful.
It's gorgeous. But first of all, I mean, if you've ever seen natural teak, it's not white. It's a fairly dark colored wood, sort of like a redwood.
Well, so it weathers though. That's the thing. Like on boats, teak is popular because it doesn't rot as readily as other woods, but it weathers to a gray, and you have to oil it. You have to actually use acid and then oil it.
Right. And I mean, I have teak patio furniture, and I have to do that. But the wood trim in the Navigator is whitewashed. So it doesn't even really look like teak. I mean, it could be, if you look really closely, you can see the grain that's kind of unique to teak, but it's, it could be a number of other things. And my wife made the comment when we were going out to dinner and this thing, it's like, teak is actually an endangered wood right now. And if you're going to use it in this way, whitewashed, where it doesn't look so much like teak, why would you bother using a veneer of an endangered wood, in this way? It just seemed like an odd choice, and, might be something that, the Lincoln design team might want to reconsider going forward, thinking about what types of woods that they use. Like I said, I mean, it looks gorgeous. I mean, personally, I prefer, and it's very, it has a very glossy finish on it. I prefer an open grain wood trim myself, but that's me. That's a personal preference. But it looks great. But maybe rethink using teak and some other endangered species of wood.
Well, I do wonder, and maybe somebody who listens to the podcast works at Ford and can connect us, or otherwise we can work the back channel as well. But I'm sure that that's been a conversation that's come up, or if it's not, I'd be surprised. And, the materials that go into the cars, they have to meet a lot of specifications. I wonder if the wood is like, what is it? FSC Forestry Stewardship Council certified, I don't know. Cause no, I mean, it does make a lot of sense. You don't want to be putting endangered materials in a car, which is, like, that's just like a double whammy. And you could do a whitewashed finish on something like bamboo. It's different, but bamboo is definitely.
I've seen wood. There's other cars with bamboo interiors. I've seen Jaguars and stuff and Aston Martins with bamboo finishes in there, and they look great.
Yeah. But now we get down to the designer going, but I didn't want friggin' bamboo in my car. I wanted teak. And if you're not the designer, you should shut up. And maybe it's reclaimed. I don't know. Who knows? Whatever.
And that's entirely possible. And if so, that's great.
Yeah. So I'm making a note, and I'm going to try to find out about it. And I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what we get on that. The car I drove also had some lovely wood trim that didn't look like wood trim, or didn't really stand out as much as it should have. I had the Volvo V90 cross-country T6, I think. It was a very nice Volvo wagon. It was brown with a tan interior. It's
the perfect auto journalist car.
Yes, it was
brown station
lovely.
wagon.
It's a very.
Did it have a manual
Volvo
transmission and a diesel too?
It did not. That's where it falls down. And we can get to that. But overall, I mean, Volvo has really nailed what their audience, I think, and what the people who aspire to own this type of car really want. I can't imagine that these are not going to sell well among the wagon competitive set, which includes, the Mercedes E-Class. I honestly don't know sort of what other natural competitors it really has. Certainly Audi's Allroad, but
that's the Allroad is actually probably the closest. Because you said it's a cross country, so it's sits a little bit higher.
Yeah, but it didn't look super butch because it doesn't have the bare plastic cladding that the original cross country had. it's all painted. So it's a brown wagon, and it looks good. And it looks, if you didn't know that it was the cross country, I don't think you'd know that it was supposed to be sort of the all-terrain version of the V90. And
That's good.
Yeah, it's a lovely car. I have some issues with the ergonomics. Volvo has tried very hard to define their own way of doing things to their detriment in some ways. I think they've changed up a lot of things. Like even when you get in and you go to start the car, I spent a minute looking for like, where's the button? And it's this little thing down on the console that you twist, and you have to really deliberately twist it as well. Like you've got to twist it and hold it, or it'll turn the power on, but then you got to twist it again to turn the engine on. And the controls gave me some frustration. I was agitated for my first day or two. I had a little Twitter freak out about Census, which is bad. And like Casey said, it's slow to wake up. So the first mile that you're driving with it, the system is clearing its throat. I don't know what it's doing, but when you're trying to adjust stuff and change the radio and things, those are the things that people do when they first get in the car. And if you have to sit there and wait for the system, and there's no indication that you have to wait for the system, it's just laggy and dopey and slow. That's really, really frustrating. And it's not intuitive to use, and everything is screen driven. So it's actually quite a distraction. I was very frustrated with this system, and I think that's the biggest black eye on this car in particular, but every Volvo, like the XC90 I had as well. It just, I can't get over that. I don't know. Maybe it's just me and I'm not being forgiving enough, but I find it a real difficult system to use and a real reason to actually not recommend the car.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I've driven, several of the 90 series Volvos with Census over the last couple of years. I've got a V60 coming next month, or an XC60 coming next month. I haven't driven the V90 yet, but Census is not a great system, to put it bluntly. It is slow. It is kind of convoluted. It's not very consistent when you're swiping back and forth between the three screens. It's never entirely clear where you're supposed to look to find certain features. And that's just not good.
No, and I'm like I said before, I'm really shocked because Volvo has had a real commitment to solid ergonomics that you can operate safely, and this just kind of walks away from it, and at the expense of the driving experience and safety. In practice, I did find myself, wandering around in my lane because I'm trying to find something simple and stupid that shouldn't be that hard to find and shouldn't be that distracting. And while the car had the full suite of safety systems, so it would center itself in the lane and it would warn if I'm going to crash into something. I shouldn't have to rely on those active safety systems to just drive the car. Yeah.
Did you use the pilot assist system?
I did not.
Okay.
And I've heard it's really good, actually. So I'm sorry, that's my oversight. I should have actually tried it out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've heard people describe it as really good, but my personal experience with it on, I think, 3 different vehicles over the last couple of years has been not so great. Really? I have not been impressed with it.
So I shut it off mostly because I wanted to try to get an idea of how the vehicle is on its own, without that filter layer of it saving you from yourself. Mm-hmm. I wanted to see inherently how good the V90 is. And it's a very good car. It's a pretty solid platform. It rides pretty well. It handles pretty well. It doesn't embarrass itself really in any respect. The Drive-E engine is amazing. The all-wheel drive system is good.
And that's the twin-charged engine, supercharged and turbocharged? Yeah.
Yeah. That engine is fantastic. Overall, it's a good wagon, and it was priced about $70,000, but it was pretty well loaded too. So that's a really solid deal when you consider premium European wagons. It's going to look like $1 million when you park it next to everybody else's E-Class, and it's cheaper. So that's a really solid play. It's a good car, and so I don't want to paint it in this light that it's horrible because Dan doesn't like it. What Dan doesn't like, Dan also learned to live with after a week. You know, I was more pleased with the,
except for census.
yeah, even that, you know, I figured it out a bit more. I still don't like it, and I would be angry if I was paying for it. But by the end of the week, I had figured it out a bit more. It is still distracting. Like at its base level, it's distracting. But it's a good car, and it's really well done. And I'm pleased as a longtime Volvo owner and fan to see them really coming to market with something that nobody else has in a way that nobody else has it. And I think that's going to serve them really well. So I did enjoy it. I wish it had a little bit more supple ride. You know, it's got big wheels and it's tuned pretty well, but it doesn't soak up that high frequency stuff, the small little things, as well as I think some of the other competitors do. It doesn't ride like a BMW, I guess is the thing that I can say, but nothing rides like a BMW except for a BMW. I just wish it was a little more supple. It felt a little bit stiff. You know, I don't know that the average person is gonna feel that though. It's a good wagon. It has my seal of approval, especially in brown. Now all I need to do is put a manual in it and switches.
Yeah, there you go.
So I would love to see what you have to say about the V90 you've got coming, or the XC60?
I've got the V90 coming.
Yeah.
I've got an XC60 coming as well. I don't think I have a V90 coming. I think maybe it's just the XC60.
Okay.
I can't remember.
Yeah, you got something coming. I'd love to see what your take is on it, because this is the way Volvo has committed to go, and maybe Census can be cleaned up with some interface and processor upgrades. I don't know. The idea, I think, in the overall execution, I mean, the interior in this car is gorgeous. The materials are beautiful. The everything you touch is lovely. It's so nice in there. And you look at the price, and yeah, it's expensive, but it's not that expensive. You know, like you were talking about with the Navigator, you know, it's hard to explain value in a segment that's just pricey to begin with, but you get a lot for your considerable pile of money here.
Yeah. So yeah, I have a V90 coming next week, and then the XC60 coming in April.
I would love to hear your, compare and contrast your experience with the V90. And we could determine whether it's just me being crotchety or if I have some legitimate commentary.
Yeah, well, I think there's room for both in there. I mean, you are inherently crotchety.
I am,
but
that's true.
But I think that there's also plenty of opportunity there for some improvement. I mean, there's nothing, as I said, there's nothing that's so good it can't be improved upon.
That's true, even me.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the cars. Let's move on to some news. We're going to keep this one tight. So, what's been going on this week is it looks like there's a couple of introductions of note.
So yesterday, we're recording this on Friday. On Thursday, Jaguar officially introduced the production version of the I-Pace, their first electric vehicle, and it looks pretty much almost exactly like the concept that was shown in November of 2016 at the LA Auto Show. It has changed very little from that concept, and that's a good thing. I think it's really it's a good looking vehicle, for a mid-sized crossover. I think Ian Callum and his team have done to my eyes, done a great job of taking some current Jaguar design language and applying it to a new kind of vehicle, new kind of powertrain, taking advantages of the fact that, you don't have to have a big, huge engine compartment and that sort of thing. So I think they've done some really good work there. Yeah.
I love how they've taken some obvious swipes at Tesla while they're at it too. They're saying things like, I wanted to make the world's most desirable EV. Was what Ian Callum said during the live stream. And I forget who said it, but it might not have been Ian Callum, but somebody was like, I'm in production heaven right now. It's just like, oh, yeah, lovely. But yeah, I think it is I love that they've already defined, it kind of started with the F-Type. They've defined this new look for Jaguar that has propagated across the line. And it's nice to see Jaguar being modern with all this history still there, but not having to do round lights and old saloon looking things. And it makes me wonder what's going to happen when this actually goes into dealerships, because you're going to be able to go and just buy one. You're not going to have to put $1,000 down and go on a waiting list. And I think also it's going to have that Jaguar assembly quality, which is, it's funny that I say this, given the history.
It's actually really good now.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. It's funny, both Volvo and Jaguar, were formerly owned by Ford, and during the big downturn a few years back, Ford, divested both of those brands, and Land Rover as well. And it's funny, you look at, GM, they got rid of, or tried to get rid of Saab, and they could never find a really good buyer to take Saab and really do something with it. It changed hands a couple of times, but to companies that didn't really have the resources to do anything useful with it.
Well, I think Saab too, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think Ford was very generous with their sales of both Jaguar and Volvo. They may have had deals about like you can only use the IP for so long, but GM didn't want to transfer as much from what it sounded like. They had that. Those Saabs were on the Epsilon platform, and they really didn't want to give up control, and I don't think they wanted it to be plagiarized as much. Yeah. So, but exactly. Ford gave freely, engines, and they needed to mortgage the farm, and they successfully did.
Right. And, both of those brands, or, all three of those brands, Jaguar, Land Rover, and Volvo, ended up with very good stewards. The companies that bought them, Tata in the case of Jaguar, Land Rover, and Geely in the case of Volvo, have taken very good care of those brands. They've invested significantly in giving them new products. It obviously took a few years to get there, to start from scratch and give them new products, new powertrains and everything. But they have not squandered the value of those brands. They've actually built the value of those brands significantly since they took them over. And, in the case of Jaguar Land Rover, with Tata, they've had their, they're getting record sales every year. Their sales have grown, beyond where they've ever been in the past. And, Geely, now with Volvo, also earlier this week, Geely announced that they've bought almost 10% of Daimler, which could be very interesting going forward.
That's a super interesting semi-hostile move.
Yeah. But, for the I-Pace, it's the first all-electric Jaguar, and it's actually going to be assembled by Magna Steyr in Austria, because Jaguar doesn't have enough production capacity in the UK right now.
They assembled a good car.
Yeah. Magna Steyr knows how to do, how to manufacture vehicles and do them consistently and do them very well. And they build vehicles for a lot of different brands. At various times, they've built, Chrysler vehicles for the European market. They've built vehicles for Porsche, for Mercedes-Benz, for BMW, and they still build the Rapide for Aston Martin. They build some minis. So it's they know what they're doing when it comes to manufacturing. And you combine that with this design, a 90 kilowatt hour battery pack, that'll give about, close to 300 miles of range, good performance, good, some practical packaging. And I think, Jaguar is going to have a winner on their hands with this one.
Oh, I agree, especially for the price. It's it's not cheap. Again, it's going to be $80-something thousand, but it's also probably going to come to market very, very well sorted. Mm-hmm.
We've actually seen pictures of them being tested in various locations, and they've been doing, testing of the manufacturing equipment, before they get vehicles that are going to go to customers.
What? That's crazy talk.
I know it's nuts, but it's one of those innovative things that companies sometimes do.
I love that it's got. So the way the electric motors are laid out, it's got two motors. So they all have 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, or however you want to adjust the software to do whatever. So it's going to drive really well. It's got a lot of. It's going to be heavy, but it's got that weight low down, and it's got all 4 wheels involved. So it's going to have impressive performance. It has 300 miles of range, like you said. They didn't try to reinvent the wheel. It's got normal doors. Mm-hmm. It's going to have the Jaguar In Control Touch Pro whatever infotainment stuff, which is decent. And I think the most interesting thing to me is they're doing a racing series with this, right? Like,
yeah.
Not drag racing, like racing.
Yeah, no, road racing. It's going to launch with the next, later this year with the next season of Formula E. It's going to be a support series for Formula E. They're going to have 20 I-Paces, for the I-Pace E-Trophy series, all identically prepared. And I think, this is one of the interesting from a marketing standpoint. I think this will be very interesting because one of the things that Tesla has really traded on with the Model S and the Model X is their incredible acceleration, and they are wicked fast in a straight line, but they don't handle all that well. And if you try to do more than 2 launches in a row, or drive it fast for any length of time, the battery pack, the power electronics, and the motor all start to overheat, and it starts to throttle the power down. And so after the first couple of minutes, it slows down significantly. And what Jaguar is doing, with doing this racing series, will they'll be able to demonstrate. Look, we can do this, but actually do it in a way that we can provide sustained performance. And it's interesting. Right. There was an interview earlier this week that came out with the head of Porsche's EV program, basically saying the same thing. We're designing the Mission E to provide the kind of strong, consistent performance that Porsche customers expect, not like that other brand, where you can do two launches in a row and then it starts to throttle you down. Our car will be able to run fast all the time.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. And really, in this situation, it's just like any other racing situation too. When you need some endurance, it's thermal management, and the ability to manage that heat and get it off the batteries and off the electronics and the motors.
Well, not only, thermal management is one piece of the pie, but also, the way you design the components to begin with so that they're more efficient, so they don't generate as much heat to begin with. So, you want to minimize the heat you generate, and then the heat that is there, you want to be able to get that off of there as quickly as you can. Right.
And that's something I have great faith in Porsche and Jaguar already knowing how to do really well.
It's funny. 25 years ago, would you have ever said those words that I have faith in Jaguar with being able to manage electrical stuff?
For motorsports, yes. For road cars, no. Jaguar, at that time, they were tied up with TWR and racing. They were doing great.
Oh, yeah. Their racing stuff was fantastic.
But completely aside, we went over the weekend to the Lars Anderson Auto Museum here in the Boston area, which is I think it's the oldest auto museum in the country because they have a supercar show. It's a small museum, but they had an XJ220, and it was just awesome to see. I was explaining it all to my 9-year-old. It was cool. They also had an Auburn Speedster. So, but anyway, it was the Jaguar Racing TWR kind of late 90s or late 80s or connection. So anyway, I think racing is going to teach them a lot about how to make these things really durable for the street. Because right now, EVs, as good as they are, and they're better than they've ever been, they still have this bit of fragility around them just because the technology is a lot younger than the internal combustion and the infrastructure for it. The one sticky problem I see with this is it has a big battery pack. It has good range. How do you charge it? Where are those DC fast chargers that can charge it up to its max capacity? Because it can handle a quick charge, but I don't know that you're going to be able to find a charger to do that.
Yeah, they're starting to open up. They've begun deploying a network of fast charging, 150 kilowatt fast charging stations across Europe. Last fall, they started deploying those. And so by the end of this year, there should be a few hundred of those. And then there's already about 1,000 DC fast charging stations here in the U.S. Most of them, unfortunately, are still concentrated near the coasts, but they are there. So they're not quite as useful, if you're doing a cross country trip as the superchargers, but we'll be getting a lot more of them in the middle part of the country over the next year or two as well. In large part because of the VW diesel settlement, the Electrify America program is putting several thousand new charging stations in place over the next 4 years. So we'll be seeing a lot more of those here as well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the uses that Massachusetts is doing with their money from that settlement too, if I recall. I skimmed something about that. So I'm going to just shoot from the hip and be misinformed, as usual. So the other introduction this week was the GMC Sierra, which
yes,
it's better. It's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it looks good, but there's actually some really interesting features that they've done on this. Especially a couple of things in particular that distinguish it from the Silverado that we saw in January at the Detroit show. And among those are this new tailgate. I forget what they call it now.
The tailgate with the tailgate, so you can tailgate.
Yeah, it's a multi-part tailgate. That's the multi-pro tailgate. So I mean,
sometimes I just want to punch marketers in the face.
I know, but I think probably it was about 10 years or so ago. We saw Ford come out with a step that was built into the tailgate. So when you wrap the tailgate down, you could pull the step out, and then it would drop down, and there's a handle that lifted up, so you could step up into the bed of the truck. And that was that's kind of cool. But what GMC has done here, and it's unique to the Sierra. The Silverado is not going to get this. It's can go in 6 different ways. So it's basically a split tailgate. So the top half, most of the center part of it, you can fold that down separately. So first of all, if you just open the tailgate normally, there's a backstop that flips up, and it's up, against the back edge. So if you have long objects in the that you want to put in the bed and you don't want them to slide out, you have this like about a 6-inch high backstop, that will keep things from sliding out the back of the tailgate. And if you have the long bed version of the truck, you have about 8.5 feet there. So you can use that to put, 4x8 sheets of plywood in the bed, and, they'll just, go right up against that backstop, and you don't have to worry about tying them down or anything. And then with the next thing you can do is that center section of the tailgate itself can drop down, so that the combination of the backstop and that piece that drops down becomes your step. You can also, when the tailgate is up, you can drop just that middle section down, and it becomes like a work area at the so for commercial uses, or even for a tailgate party, it becomes a table, kind of like at a bar height. It's about 4 feet up off the ground. So there's a lot of different ways you can use it. Very, very cool feature. And it's all built right into this tailgate. So that's very handy. But then one of the other things that is totally unique to the Sierra is this optional carbon fiber bed.
Yeah, so that, to me, that made me pause for a second, because I can't remember whether it was GM or Ford that had been sort of touting, like, yeah, okay, fine, composite beds, not carbon fiber, but there's several trucks out there with composite beds, the Ridgeline.
Yeah, they were glass reinforced composites, yeah.
Yeah, they've been taking shots at the composite beds, and now they're coming out with almost like the ultimate composite bed with carbon fiber. So it's like, yeah, forget everything we said before about metal beds and how you want that. Like, this is the new great thing. And I agree. Composite beds are fantastic.
Yeah. Well, back in the early 2000s, Ford on the Explorer Sport pickup did a composite bed on that one, and they also did a limited run of Rangers back in the mid 90s as an experiment. But the Explorer Sport was the first kind of mainstream production application of a composite pickup bed. But I mean, that was a fairly small bed. It was, it wasn't really that useful as a pickup truck. And it wasn't a huge seller, but that was the first kind of production composite pickup bed. But what they've done with this one, the material and the manufacturing process for this bed is something that's totally new and has never been done for automotive applications before. Traditional carbon fiber stuff, when you see carbon fiber parts on a car, when they're not painted, usually, you'll see the matte weave, and the way they're made, they take basically a carbon fiber mat, a woven carbon fiber mat, it's like a fabric. They lay it into a mold and they, put the resin in there and they press it in, they press the two halves of the mold together, and then they bake it in an autoclave to cure it.
So in the autoclave, like that's under vacuum, right?
Yeah. And that's about a 45-minute process to do that.
Yeah. And for something as large as a pickup truck bed too, it's
yeah. Well, the carbon fiber mat, because you need long strands of carbon fiber to do that, it's very expensive. It's an expensive material and it's an expensive process, and it takes a long time, and it's a very slow process to make that, which is why we've only seen it on very low volume applications. The closest to a higher volume application we've seen is the BMW i3. And even that's still relatively low volume. And they're still using that same type of process, although they've adapted it and made it more cost effective. What they're doing for the Sierra is something completely different. So instead of long strands of carbon fiber, this is essentially a sheet molding compound, which is a material that they've been using, since the early 70s for the bodies of Corvettes. They use it for a wide variety of applications, but in the past it's always been used with glass fiber reinforcement. So the way it's made, you basically have one layer, with a pasty resin on there, and you put the fibers on it, and then a second layer goes on there, and then you just press it into a mold and heat it up, and it's about a 1 minute cycle time to make a part.
Well, it's if you're familiar with fiberglass at all, like do-it-yourself fiberglass, you can get the mat, and you can also get like I guess it's also matte, but it's like you can get the woven mat or the random strands where they're. Is that what you're talking about?
And that's the random strands, and that the strands of fiber are typically about an inch long. Mm-hmm. And it's those random strands. That's what typically gets used in most applications, most volume production applications.
Much cheaper.
That's what they're doing for the carbon fiber bed on the Sierra, is the random strands of carbon fibers. And you can see, if you look at it, you can see the random strands in there. But so that makes it far less expensive. It's molding each of the parts for this thing. The bed is made of 4 parts, that are then bolted together. It takes about a minute. So 1 minute cycle time to do that, as opposed to 45 minutes for the traditional approach.
Yeah, so that's comparable with a body press, like a steel press. So
yeah, exactly. And this carbon fiber bed saves 62 pounds compared to the steel bed. And it's tougher than the steel bed. They showed a video during the presentation. You remember the ad they did a couple of years ago for the Silverado, where they took a front end loader and dropped a bunch of cinder blocks into the bed of an F-150, of an aluminum F-150, and it tore up the aluminum. Yeah. And then they did that with a Silverado. Well, they did the same thing with the carbon fiber bed, and the blocks, nothing. It literally just didn't even dent them. Didn't even dent the bed. And then they showed a bunch of other stuff, somebody standing in there with a sledgehammer pounding on one of these blocks, and, the bed is totally impervious to it. It's really impressive. And I can see a lot of interesting applications for this carbon fiber SMC going forward.
Gotta love those aerospace materials.
Yep.
They've taken 300 something pounds out of the Sierra, which is pretty impressive. And
360. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah. Well, and that's on the base steel version. That's without the carbon fiber bed. So the carbon fiber bed, that takes it up to over 400 pounds.
That's significant. I mean, they must, and it's the engines stay the same. It's the 5.3 liters. So
same. Engine. So far, they've announced the same engines that are in the Silverado. So you get the 5.3 and the 6.2 V8 with the new dynamic skip fire system that can shut off up to 7 of the 8 cylinders. And then the other version is the 3-liter inline 6 diesel that's coming as well.
That's going to be super neat. I can't wait to just check that one out. I've heard smack talk about the way it looks. Now, I honestly think it looks great, but between the Sierra and the Ram now, like, which do you think is the sort of better refresh?
I don't know. I think they both look good in their own ways. You know, I can't honestly say that I have a particular preference for one over the other. I'm unoffended by both of them. Let's put it that way.
They both, look trucky.
Yeah, they both look like big pickup trucks. I mean, there's only so much you can do with the pickup truck form factor, you know, and maintain the functionality of the thing. You know, so you know. They both look good, you know, significantly more modern. You know, they've got a little, you know, the GM trucks especially have a little more character than they did before. You know, the GMC, the Sierra especially, I think is a good improvement. It's a little cleaner than before. You know, granted, during the presentation yesterday, the exterior designer kind of went on and on a little bit too much about the detailing in the grill. I already had a chat with Terry Radigan about that. But, you know, hey, you know, you do good work. You're proud of it. You want to talk about it.
Hey, look, it has that lovely
I totally
mesh
sympathize
pattern.
with that.
Yeah. Sure. And details are really what set the cars apart today anyway. I mean, that was the thing that I appreciated the most about the Volvo this week, was just how everything seemed fussed over. They attended to all the details, and that's important. So we are out of the era of sort of slapdash pickup truck assembly.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Even if you got the base model of the new Sierra with the 4.3 liter V6 and stuff, like, this is, trucks are in a different place than they ever were before.
Yeah. And I don't know that we're actually going to get a 4.3 liter this time. I'm not sure what we're going to have as the base engine this time. I think it might actually be a version of the 3.6 liter.
Oh, okay. So
I wouldn't be surprised to see the 4.3 go away.
So they're really pushing. I guess they're doing the same thing that Ford and Lincoln are. Right? It seems like they're trying to push a little bit of difference in, because this is the most different the Sierra has been from the Silverado in forever. I can't remember.
Yeah, well, I think we'll have the same powertrains in both, because, you know, they haven't announced any gas V6 engine options for either one of them. Those announcements will be coming later. So you know, but my guess is, you know, we'll probably see the 4.3 go away and be replaced by a version of the 3.6.
So, all right, well, pickup trucks continue to evolve, and, you know, we're going to get mid-sized trucks under, so that we it's this weird thing. It's like a cycle.
Yeah.
Start small, get big. New thing comes. Start small, gets big. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we've exhausted the topic list, but
we have one longer email that we'll come back to next week. You know, that was looking for some buying advice, some shopping advice. But I do want to address one other question that came in, and for the life of me, I cannot find the original. But it was about. It was asking about USB-C in vehicles, you know, and for those of us that own newer Android phones or own a lot of newer laptops, you know, we're now starting to get USB-C showing up in there, in all those devices, and, you know, all of our cars and trucks still have USB type A ports, which are the larger rectangular ones. USB-C are nice because they're reversible, so you don't have to think about which way it goes in. And also they can transmit a lot more power. So you can get up to 100 watts over a USB-C port. Which is why they're using them for charging ports for laptops and things like that now. None of the phones are doing 100-watt charging yet, but even phones with USB Type-C, you know, are doing like 15 to 18 watts charging, so they have much faster charging. So the question was, when are we going to see USB-C ports showing up in vehicles? And the answer is very, very soon. It looks like the first ones to hit the market are going to be the new Ram pickups, and I'm actually going out to Phoenix on Monday to drive the new Ram, and so I'll let you know how those work out in there. And the Silverado and Sierra also have USB-C ports. They have ports in both the front and rear seating positions. So they have both USB-A and USB-C, so you can plug in whatever you need to plug to charge, and they have plenty of ports. I think the last time I had a Silverado, the current generation Silverado, I think it had something like 6 or 7 USB ports in it.
I think you have to make them for match the amount of cup holders.
Yeah, I believe that is the new SAE standard.
Is it really?
No.
Okay, you're very convincing.
So you can never have too many USB ports in a modern vehicle.
No, and designers must like them too, or the folks that have to package all this stuff in the interior, because the USB-C port is physically much smaller than the older traditional USB ports. So.
And we'll continue to have both ports in there for probably quite a few years to come. Probably as long as Apple holds out and continues to put their little Lightning connectors on iPhones and iPads, we'll probably continue to have USB-As. Well, actually, even for other devices as well. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that doesn't use USB-C yet.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part. So I have a MacBook Pro that I use for work, and it's only got USB-C, and it drives me a little bit crazy because I'm often trying to interface with the USB world, and I need a dongle for everything I'm doing. And it's like sometimes I got to string 3 or 4 dongles together. Like if I want to project my screen or just connect to other devices, it's a real pain. And I can see that in cars too, unless you have both kind of ports side to side, but that drives up costs. So at a certain point, I wonder if they're saying like, okay, we'll give it a 5-year window, and by that point, everybody who will have replaced their devices, I suppose, so that it should have reached some sort of critical mass, and we can start taking the older USB ports out of cars, because that's going to happen. Yeah,
that'll probably happen. I mean, what may well happen first is we'll see the old round, cigarette lighter ports, the 12-volt ports, go away first. I mean, those take up a lot more space. Those may disappear earlier, or may end up keeping those around forever. Who knows? But yeah, and then at some point, USB-A ports, the rectangular ones, will go away and just be replaced by USB-C.
Yeah, or you know what? I'm just going to get a pair of jumper cables and run them out the window under the hood. Just look, we got plenty of power here. Just don't touch them together.
That's right.
So yeah, that question came in from Jeff. I found it. It was Facebook. But yeah, so if you have a question you would like us to answer or attempt to answer, feel free to send it in. You can catch us on Facebook or through Twitter. We're on Twitter at Wheelbearings Cast, no vowels except for the A in cast. Both of us are infamous enough on Twitter where you can find us. You are at Sam Aboil Samid. I am at Boston_auto. Go to wheelbearings.media. You can email us from there. Other than that, I think we've consumed a good hour of everybody's time, and I think we're
leave us a review on iTunes if you like the show, and tell your friends about it, and thanks for listening.
All right, we'll see everybody next week. Happy trails.
All right, bye.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.